Since the Ukraine war broke out on February 24th, global oil and gas prices have been rising. Yet, in mid-April, a Chinese energy giant, the largest offshore oil and gas producer in China, CNOOC, is preparing to sell off its assets in the UK, Canada, and the US. This came just days after China's three largest state-owned oil companies, including CNOOC, had paused their Russian deals. What does this series of actions mean? What's the prospect of overseas markets for the Chinese energy giants? In 2013, CNOOC acquired Nexen Energy in Canada for $15 billion, its largest overseas acquisition to date. Through the years, CNOOC has failed to fulfill the commitments it made to the Canadian government when it acquired Nexen, such as retaining Nexen's management team and employees. Following CNOOC's acquisition of the company, it replaced Canadian senior staff with Chinese nationals and dismissed the original staff. Nexen's assets, including exploration and development as well as production projects, are located in a number of regions, including Western Canada, the UK North Sea, and the Gulf of Mexico. CNOOC has thus extended its operations into the UK, Canada, and the US. Reuters estimates that CNOOC's assets in large fields in the North Sea, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Canadian oil sands have the equivalent of nearly 220,000 barrels of oil production capacity per day. However, less than 10 years after entering the Canadian, US, and UK markets, CNOOC is now preparing to withdraw completely. At the end of March 2022, CNOOC hired US banks to prepare for the sale of assets located in the North Sea, worth $3 billion. While exiting some Western markets, CNOOC has planned to list on the Shanghai Stock Exchange. On April 11th, CNOOC said in its pre-IPO prospectus that the company couldn't predict whether its subsidiaries, or partners would be sanctioned in the future if policies change. In addition to the A-share prospectus, CNOOC's 2021 annual report, released on April 12th, also spelled out the risk of sanctions by the US. In November 2020, then-President Trump signed an executive order prohibiting US investment in Chinese companies with military backgrounds. CNOOC was on this blacklist, and the ban on CNOOC's investments took effect on March 9, 2021. On October 22, 2021, CNOOC was delisted from the New York Stock Exchange, becoming the fourth Chinese company to be delisted for the same reason. Subsequently, CNOOC was also delisted from the Toronto Stock Exchange in Canada. The U.S. Department of Commerce sanctioned CNOOC for reasons that also involve the South China Sea. The South China Sea covers 3.5 million square kilometers of water south of Hong Kong and is rich in oil and gas deposits. Brunei, Malaysia, the Philippines, Taiwan, and Vietnam all claim partial sovereignty over the waters. The Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, claims sovereignty over 90% of the South China Sea. In offshore drilling for crude oil and natural gas development operations, CNOOC's operations are larger than those of the other two big companies, CNPC and SINOPEC, in China. In particular, CNOOC has been drilling for crude oil in the South China Sea, a disputed area with Vietnam. Vietnam has been protesting CNOOC's South China Sea tenders as a serious violation of Vietnamese sovereignty. Vietnam has urged China to withdraw its oil drilling platforms and related vessels from the disputed waters in the South China Sea. China has refused to engage in dialogue. The U.S. sanctions have undoubtedly affected CNOOC's reputation. They have sent a clear message to the world that CNOOC's business touches on an internationally sensitive issue. The sanctions demonstrate that the U.S. is taking actions to curb the ability of communist energy companies to access resources in the global energy market. CNOOC's dynamics are also tied to the internal struggle of the Chinese Communist Party. China's major economic lifelines are divided up among the Communist Party's top interests. The oil sector, which includes CNOOC, CNPC, and SINOPEC, is commonly known to be owned by Zheng Qinghong. Zheng is a former member of the Standing Committee of the CCP's Politburo, the CCP's highest decision-making body, and was once the vice chairman of the State Council. He is the partner of former party leader Jiang Zemin, the CCP's former leader who is considered to be the real owner behind China's three oil giants, or three oil barrels as the Chinese call them. Over the years, Jiang has been considered the biggest rivalry of the current party leader Xi Jinping. The two have been fighting since Xi came to power. During such infights, Zheng has lost a number of his close associates. To this day, however, Zheng still has influence over the oil industry in mainland China. At present, Xi's top priority is to renew his term and be re-elected at the CCP's 20th National Congress this fall. His primary concern is to guard against a resurgence of anti-Xi forces. Under Jiang Zemin, Wall Street had been feeding the CCP's record of extreme human rights abuses. For example, in 1999, Jiang launched a massive persecution of Falun Gong. Falun Gong practitioners believe in truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. Those working in China's petroleum system were severely persecuted as a result. In April 2000, CNPC was listed on the New York Stock Exchange with an initial public offering of $680 million. As of February 25, 2019, its market capitalization was $123.6 billion. In October 2000, CNOOC was listed on the New York Stock Exchange. As of February 25, 2019, its market capitalization was $104.6 billion. CNOOC was listed on the New York Stock Exchange in February 2001 and raised nearly $6 billion from the international capital markets by April 28, 2006. By August 2016, its market capitalization exceeded $53.5 billion. A former employee of the CNPC Pipeline Bureau who lives in Washington, D.C., told overseas Chinese media that CNPC donated RMB 10,000 or about $1,560 for each arrested Falun Gong practitioner to the 610 office, an organization set up by the CCP to persecute Falun Gong. In 2003, the International Organization for the Persecution of Falun Gong warned that the CCP's persecution of Falun Gong was costly and unprecedented, and that overseas investment in Chinese companies was being used to persecute Falun Gong. This situation has been changing dramatically in the recent 5 years. Now CNOOC is selling its assets in Canada, the US, and the UK. CNOOC executives, including its chairman, have complained that management of Nexon's former assets, tediously regulated by the Canadian government and costly to operate, is more cumbersome than managing assets in developing countries. In the US, CNOOC executives need a security clearance to enter and exit the US, creating considerable obstacles for daily operations management. Assets, such as deepwater oil in the Gulf of Mexico, also face technical challenges and require learning from its peers and partners, but the company's management can't even get to its U.S. offices. Over the years, these overseas assets have become a hot potato for CNOOC, and the Trump administration's sanctions list of CNOOC executives has made these Communist Party officials even more anxious. Now that CNOOC has withdrawn from Western countries, it is conceivable that major Chinese communist companies are having their tentacles cut off overseas. More US-listed Chinese companies may follow CNOOC's lead as they are facing the threat of delisting. For a long time, they have been restricted by the Chinese government from providing the SEC with the required financial reporting information. It has become more acute over the past 2 years as Chinese regulators have further tightened control over data from overseas listed companies, causing growing discontent within the US. On April 12, the US Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, placed the fourth group of 12 Chinese companies on its delisting watch list. A total of 23 Chinese companies are now on the list, including Chinese social media giant Weibo, as well as well-known online companies such as Sohu and Baidu. The 12 companies on the new pre-delisting watch list will be moved to the delisting list if they fail to submit evidence that they have met the listing requirements by May 3rd. Companies placed on the delisting list will be required to file documents required by the SEC within 3 years, and if they fail to do so or if the documents they file do not meet the requirements, they will theoretically face delisting in early 2024 after disclosing their 2023 annual report. This list is expected to gradually extend as more Chinese stocks report their annual reports. Under the audit principles insisted by the SEC, the CCP had to make concessions despite protesting for more than a year. Not too long ago, the China Securities Regulatory Commission issued a request for comments on revising the overseas listing of Chinese companies, making it clear that it will complete audits of Chinese companies through a cross-border regulatory mechanism and mentioning that the Commission and relevant agencies will provide the necessary assistance. Since China's accession to the WTO in 2001, U.S. administrations adopted a policy of appeasement towards the CCP with only criticism but no actions. It appears the U.S. government has realized that under the current international environment, as well as the internal environment in China, if the U.S. and China really decouple financially, it will be the CCP that can't afford it, not the U.S. In addition, the severe sanctions imposed by the US and Europe on Russia have also made the CCP worried and fearful. One of the reasons is that it hasn't yet achieved technological independence and needs to rely on the US. If it's sanctioned, it will suffer great technical and economic losses. The CCP also fears that its overseas assets may be confiscated. On April 14th, Secretary of State Blinken said in a video conference on 21st century diplomacy and global challenges that the CCP's inconsistent words and actions on the Russia-Ukraine war and the huge disconnect between the CCP's stated position and its actual actions have damaged China's international reputation. Blinken also made it clear that the fundamental principles of the international system are at stake and that the CCP must ultimately make a choice. According to sources quoted by Reuters, CNOOC, CNPC, and CNOOC have been assessing the impact of Western sanctions on their multi-billion-dollar investments in Russia since Russia invaded Ukraine in February. Now the three companies will only honor existing Russian oil contracts but avoid signing new ones, I'll bet at very favorable prices. China's foreign ministry has also warned the three companies not to rush into buying Russian assets. CNOOC has also called off negotiations for a $500 million investment in a new natural gas chemical plant in Russia. This shows that Beijing does fear secondary sanctions from countries like the US. Nonetheless, it's also possible that the pro-Russian faction within the divided Communist Party has had to concede in order to appease the internal opposition. Recently, U.S. House Trade Representative Catherine Tai said that the U.S. may have reached the limits of its good faith efforts to negotiate with the CCP. She mentioned that in the long run, the CCP's trade challenge to the U.S. goes far beyond today's Russian crisis. Although the CCP is not showing weakness on the surface, secretly it should be very worried that it will be in the same situation as Russia. The CCP's current focus is also on the domestic market, hoping to reduce its dependence on world trade. As such, in recent official Chinese media, there have been high-profile propaganda about the great domestic circulation and the need to speed up the construction of a unified national market. In other words, the CCP is preparing a way to deal with the Western countries decoupling. On the one hand, the CCP doesn't want to rely on the US, but at the same time, it can't avoid its reliance on the US. That's why it's withdrawing and investing cautiously in Russia on the one hand and strengthening domestic food production on the other in order to move towards an economic model of internal circulation. So where can the CCP find opportunities away from its old friends in the West? Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, who recently embarked on a whirlwind visit to India, hopes to convince Indian Prime Minister Modi to attend this year's BRICS summit in China. Beijing wants to use its influence in Southeast Asia. In 2020, ASEAN replaced Europe as China's largest trading partner. The CCP is also extending its reach to the Middle East and Africa through the New Silk Road. CNOOC is currently on this path. Reuters reports that sources have revealed that CNOOC is looking to acquire energy assets in Latin America and African countries as it exits Western countries, in an attempt to shift the focus of its overseas asset expansion to countries such as Brazil, Ghana, and Uganda. Some countries in these regions are open to the CCP's investment, but for Beijing it should be a reluctant option as it runs out of alternatives. The history of joining hands with old friends in the West to make a fortune has turned the page.